I'm about to try and complete the craziest challenge that I will ever attempt. Trying to beat the fastest ever lap time driven on an F1 game. The record is unsurprisingly held by Jarno Opmeer, who set a 57-second no-rules lap time around Monaco all the way back in 2021. And I'm going to try and beat this. You see, 3 months ago, I managed to set a 59-second lap time with a normal F1 24 time trial car around Mexico. In this video, I'm going to be using a level 1000 F1 world car around the exact same track to try and knock off the 3 seconds that separates me and the fastest ever lap driven on an F1 game. So I don't usually do this, but for my first lap we're going to go through all of it, because how often do you see a no rules lap around Mexico? For the first 3 corners I knew that I would have to cut them completely, which I did in the sub 1 minute lap time challenge. However, I could actually handle the car there, and as you're about to see for this video, it would not be the case. Yeah, this F1 World car was just impossible to handle. I mean, I could not press down the accelerator without getting a massive snap of oversteer. And now it's time for turn 4 and 5, and once again I was flat out along the grass, and I'll be honest, for a first lap I had a very good run, as I managed to hit the apex of turn 6 perfectly, which I did not expect. On the exit of the corner, unfortunately I had another snap, but that's fine, because for a first lap I know that I'll make it up soon, and we're going to speed up all the way to the stadium section. And this is because for the rest of sector 2 I just didn't make any mistakes. Going through turn 12, initially I had a good run before a snap in 4th gear, and then through the rest of the lap I didn't really make any mistakes before the finish line. I managed to cut the pit lane entrance very well, and I finished the lap just over 13 seconds away from Jarno's lap time. And not too long after this, once my battery was recharged, it was time to go for another push lap. Going through the first 3 corners, unsurprisingly my run wasn't perfect. However, even with almost 20% tyre wear, I still kept the car going in a straight line, which meant by the end of the second DRS straight I was almost 7 seconds up to the delta. And after this it was time for turn 4, 5 and 6, where I knew that I wouldn't be able to match the good run that I had on the previous lap. However, I still had a pretty decent 3 corners, and I left turn 6 still over 6 seconds up. Once again, we're going to go through the second sector very quickly, but I did make a slight mistake in the S's section, which had a large knock-on effect by the time we reached the stadium section. I was now only 5.3 seconds up, however there was a lot of time to find on the exit of turn 12. And I had such a good run going through the stadium, which if I didn't smash into the barrier before the main straight, I would have made over 7 seconds worth of progress on this lap. However, I did still make a 6.3 second improvement, and I was just over 7 seconds away from the fastest ever lap on an F1 game. And as we fade into the next improvement, going through the first 3 corners, I had a massive snap before I got onto the grass, but I held it together, and as I came off the grass I gained so much time. And by the time we get to the end of the second straight on this track, I was going to be over 4/10ths up. Now it's time for the 3 corners after this straight, and I absolutely nailed it, because I was straight onto the tarmac for turn 6, and this put me almost a second up with time to find in the winding corners. Going through these few corners, my plan definitely wasn't to use a flashback halfway through it, but we can ignore that, as by the time we get onto the 3rd DRS straight on this track, I was now 1.5 seconds up. And this could bring me so much closer to the overall goal. Next up was turn 12 and the stadium section, but to be honest, nothing really changed in terms of lap time. However, if I could take the final corner properly, I would gain so much time. And that is exactly what I did. This time I didn't completely smash into the barrier on the exit, which meant that I gained even more lap time, and by the time we reached the finish line, I'd gained 2.2 seconds. And to be honest, this was probably going to be my final multiple second improvement of this video. However, I was not done in this first quali session just yet, as I was desperate to complete my goal of breaking the 1 minute mark in Q1. Once again, we're going through the winding section of corners, and to be honest, probably not having to use a flashback on this lap meant that I was gaining time all the way up to turn 12. Going through turn 12, I had a borderline perfect run, and so frustratingly, I just could not keep the car under control going through the stadium section. However, I did know that I would make up for this on future improvements, and I still made a half a second improvement on this lap. And I was now under 4.5 seconds away from Jarno's lap time. It's now time for my final lap of Q1, and for the first time in this challenge, I decided that I was going to take the first 3 corners with a different line. My plan was to spend less time on the grass, which worked out so well, as I had a perfect run, and I wasn't done trying new things on this lap, as I was desperate to get below the 1 minute mark. And going through the next 3 corners, I absolutely sent it into the barriers, which basically acted as a braking system for me, and after a very clean exit from turn 6, I was now 8.5 up. And sadly, as we fade into later in the lap, I'd lost a little bit of lap time, but I still knew that I could gain this back and more in the final couple of corners, which is exactly what I did, as I probably had the perfect final corner, which gained me 8/10ths alone, and on this lap I'd completed the first goal of this challenge. I'd broken the 1 minute mark by just over 4/10ths of a second, and I was now just over 2.7 seconds away from the overall goal. And it's now time for Q2, and as you know, my aim for this qualifying session was to get within a second of the fastest ever lap on an F1 game. And my banker lap was only 2/10ths away from my personal best, and I was so confident that I was going to set some new improvements very quickly. And with 4.5 minutes left in this session, it was time for my first lap on new soft tyres. And because I was on fresh tyres, I decided that I was going to take a risk and take the first 3 corners along the grass, as I would have more grip, and luckily luckily for me this worked out perfectly. I was now 8 tenths up, and if I could maintain this I would set a lap time below 59 seconds. However, it was all about to go slightly downhill from here, as going through the next few corners I seemed to forget that smashing into the barrier worked really well on my best lap in Q1. This meant that leaving turn 6 I was now down to the delta, but the lap was not over just yet. And it's now time for the next 5 winding corners in the middle sector, where luckily for me I gained a little bit of time, and coming into turn 12 I was almost 2 tenths up. Going through turn 12 and the stadium section I had a fantastic run, which brought me to 9 tenths of a second up, which pretty much I managed to maintain all the way up to the finish line. To be fair, I did have a slightly poor run going through the final corner, but by sheer luck I just about managed to beat the 59 second lap, and I knew that there was so much time to find in my future improvements. And not too long after this I was 2 tenths up coming into the final few corners on this lap, and I knew that I could gain so much time on the exit of the final corner. So I was actually slightly down to the delta going through the stadium. However, I wasn't too worried, as I planned to set myself up for a good exit out of the final corner. And this worked out exactly how I wanted it to. I had such a good racing line, and I gained an absolutely massive 6.5 tenths of a second. And by the way, I set this lap on medium tyres. And it's now time for the final lap of Q2, and we're coming into turn 4, 5 and 6 slightly down to the delta. I'm pretty sure all of the gain that I made through here was because I got a lucky bounce off of the barrier, because I managed to get a great exit out of turn 6, and I was 3 tenths up coming into the next 5 corners. And I managed to gain even more time going through these winding corners. To be honest, I'm also pretty sure that it's because I turned on my EOS just a little bit earlier than my previous lap, and I was gaining from turn 7 all the way up to turn 12. And coming into the stadium section I would be almost 6 tenths up. And I maintained this all the way to the final corner, as I also had a very good run going through the stadium, but sadly through the final corner I couldn't quite match my previous lap's fantastic run. However, on this lap I still made just over 4 tenths worth of progress, and I was delighted with this because I had completed my Q2 goal of getting 1 second away from the overall goal. And to start this final qualifying session, I also set a very good banker lap, which was only a 10th off of my personal best, and I was so ready to complete this challenge. So surprisingly, my first push lap of Q3 with the Delta didn't actually start that well, because as you can see in the background, I was never actually in the green in either of the first or the middle sector. And this is even with my middle sector being a personal best. So I knew that coming into the final sector, I would have to be on absolute rails if I wanted to make any improvement. And I'll be honest, I had an unbelievable final sector, because the second that I entered the stadium section, I was just gaining time literally everywhere. This was right up until the finish line, where I would make 2.5 tenths worth of progress to my personal best, and I was now 6 tenths away from the fastest ever lap time set on an F1 game. Here we go, it is now time for my final lap of Q3, and this is what the whole challenge had come down to. I had to find just under 6 tenths of a second, and I started this final lap so well as coming into turn 4, 5 and 6 I was already a 10th up. And then going through these next 3 corners, everything was just improvement. I got a fantastic bounce off of the wall, and leaving turn 6 coming into the winding corners I was almost 3 tenths up. And going through the next 5 corners, I initially maintained my gain to the delta, which would have been fine. However, just before the entry to the final DRS straight on the track, I smashed into the polystyrene barriers. This cost me an entire 10th of a second, so once again I was going to need a very special final sector, which at first I did just that. Going through the stadium I slowly gained time up until the final corner, where I was now 3 tenths up. And we're now going to slow the footage right down as this lap gets crazy. I had an excellent bounce off of the final corner's exit wall, and as you can see I was gaining so much time, but I was about to make a devastating mistake. We're going to stop this lap just here, and as you can see I've hit the barrier on the inside of the pit lane entry, and this was going to have a huge consequence. This mistake put me offline, and I could not cut the pit lane entrance, and there was a point here where I was just below 5 tenths up, and if I could have taken my ideal racing line I would have gained so much more time, and I know that I would have completed the challenge here. And sadly I had not completed the overall goal. I was 1.4 tenths off of the fastest ever lap set on an F1 game, and I'll be honest, I was devastated. But I was not going to give up here, because in time trial mode there is an infinite amount of laps, so I knew that I just had to keep on trying. And all I knew was that I was going to have to set an absolutely unbelievable lap if I wanted to complete this challenge.
This is it. This is the lap of the weekend.
I had done it. After so many reruns of Q3 sessions, I had finally beat the fastest ever lap time set on an F1 game by exactly 1/10 of a second, and I was absolutely delighted. Basically, this means that I am clear of Jarno Opmeer, so subscribe if you want me to 1v1 him on a controller, and if I get to 20,000 subscribers by the end of the year, I will make it happen.